Have you ever felt it? You're surrounded by people, at work, at family gatherings, even at parties, and yet deep down you feel completely alone. Smiles around you feel distant. Conversations sound hollow, and while the world sees you as fine, your heart quietly whispers, "No one really sees me." If that resonates, stay with me, because what you are experiencing isn't just loneliness, it's something deeper, and Buddhist teachings hold a light that can help you understand it, and more importantly, transform it. Loneliness in a crowd is one of the great paradoxes of modern life. We can be more connected than ever, phones buzzing, feeds scrolling, messages piling up, and yet never feel truly known. Why is that? Buddhism explains this not as a flaw in you, but as a misunderstanding of what connection truly is. 1. The illusion of connection. The illusion of connection is seductive because it looks so much like the real thing. A packed subway car, a buzzing office, a crowded party, bodies shoulder to shoulder, laughter in the air, notifications lighting up our palms. Feels like proximity should add up to closeness, as if head count could replace heart count. Yet Buddhist teachings point to a gentle distinction we keep forgetting. Appearances are not essence. A flock of starlings can move as one without a single bird knowing another's name. Coordination is not intimacy. Synchrony is not sincerity. And standing in the middle of a murmuration, you can still feel alone. Think of a lake at dusk. When the sky turns gold, the water throws back a perfect copy, clouds, tree line, all of it. But dip your hand beneath the reflection and there's nothing to hold. That is the social surface we often mistake for relationship. A mirror of activity, a faithful image of together with very little depth below. Buddhist teachings invite us to look past the reflection. The Buddha's insight wasn't a scolding. It was a kindness. We suffer when we cling to surfaces and call them substance. We scroll through highlight reels, we rack up followers, we join bigger rooms, and the signal still doesn't come through because signal is presence, not population. Presence has a texture you can feel. The way a redwood grove quiets your breathing as you step inside. Scientists talk about the wood wide web, roots and mycelium sharing nutrients, trees attending to one another beneath the soil. That is closer to the essence of real connection. Invisible exchanges of attention and care, not just visible nearness. Football stadium roars and you get the rush of belonging for a few hours. Later, walking to your car under a big American sky, the noise evaporates and the ache returns. The crowd gave you a temperature spike. Presence is what keeps you warm. Buddhist teachings describe this warmth as what happens when two hearts actually meet. Not theatrically, quietly. You can be 6 inches from someone and still be miles away if your attention is elsewhere. You can be hundreds of miles apart and feel understood if the attention is steady and clean. Presence is attention without an agenda. It is letting another person exist in your field without trying to fix them, perform for them, or harvest them for validation. It's the difference between lightning and a campfire. Lightning dazzles and vanishes. A campfire asks you to sit, to notice the small sounds, to stay long enough that your clothes remember the smoke. This is why the crowded places can sting. We are surrounded by lightning, gorgeous moments, rapid sparks, instant impressions, and the nervous system confuses spectacle with nourishment. A hawk rides a thermal over the canyon for minutes at a time, barely moving its wings. There is nothing showy about it, only precision and patience. Real connection rides the thermal of attention like that. Quiet, sustained, almost invisible from the outside. Slow coffee at a kitchen table. It's the pause before you answer, where you choose curiosity instead of a preloaded speech. It's the courage to let silence be part of the conversation, the way a tide pulls back so the shore can breathe. The Buddha's path is practical here. We don't have to condemn crowds nor flee to a cave. We just stop outsourcing intimacy to head counts and headlines. We notice the small betrayals of attention, the way the phone raises its hand in the middle of a sentence, the way we listen for our turn rather than the other's meaning, the way we perform a polished self in public, and then wonder why no one meets the person who actually needs company. Buddhist teachings ask for a simpler move. Come back to your body, soften the eyes, put down what you're gripping in your mind, and let the person before you become specific again. The maple leaf is not a leaf once you really look. It's this vein, this edge, this red that wasn't here yesterday. People become real the same way, detail by merciful detail when presence returns. Nature keeps offering reminders. Coral reefs look like a single organism from a distance. Up close, they're colonies of tiny lives trading nourishment in every direction. Prairie grasses create deep roots to weather the wind, connection that holds because it's underground and patient. Snow falls and covers everything in the same white. But spring reveals what was always there beneath, distinct forms, each needing a different kind of light. In crowds, we live at snow level, where sameness passes for safety. Presence is spring. It melts the glaze so shapes can be known again. And when that happens, when the glaze thins, when essence comes forward, the loneliness eases not because the room got bigger, but because you finally arrived. You are no longer a performer scanning for approval. You are a participant offering attention. Someone else feels it. Maybe a friend, maybe a stranger. And something unremarkable and holy occurs. Two human beings share the same moment with their guard down. The room hasn't changed. The numbers haven't changed. But the essence has, and with it, the truth at the heart of Buddhist teachings comes into focus. Connection is not a statistic. It is a quality of presence. Bodies can share space. Only hearts can share a moment. Do you the root of the lonely heart? The root of the lonely heart is not always found in the silence of an empty room. More often, it's found in the noise of a crowded one. You can stand among hundreds of people, their voices spilling into the air like a rushing river, and still feel like a ghost passing unnoticed. That ache doesn't come simply because others fail to recognize us. It comes because, in the rush to be seen, we forget to look inward. Buddhist teachings remind us of this quiet truth. When you remain a stranger to yourself, no amount of applause or attention will fill the hollow. Think of a tree standing on the edge of a cliff. Its branches stretch toward the sun, desperate for light, yet its roots cling shallowly to loose stone. No matter how much warmth touches the leaves, the tree trembles because its foundation is fragile. In the same way, many of us reach outward, toward likes, toward compliments, toward someone's approving glance, hoping these flashes of sunlight will steady us. But without roots in our own presence, we sway at the mercy of every passing wind. The Buddha once said, "You yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection." That statement sounds simple, almost like a gentle whisper, yet it cuts to the heart of the matter. Buddhist teachings do not tell us to turn away from others, but to stop abandoning ourselves while chasing their approval. Loneliness in crowds grows sharpest when the gaze of the world becomes more important than the gaze we offer our own soul. Nature illustrates this paradox beautifully. Consider the ocean tide. Waves crash endlessly against the shore, seeking to touch what they can never keep. The motion is loud, dramatic, endless. But beneath that restless surface lies the deep sea, silent, steady, nourishing entire ecosystems in the dark. Our outward seeking is like the restless tide, never satisfied because it never arrives. Our inward resting is the deep sea, quiet, sustaining, rich beyond measure. Buddhist teachings invite us to dive beneath the waves of longing for recognition and discover the calm that has always lived in the depths of our own being. When you don't rest in yourself, even love given by others feels temporary. A compliment lands and disappears, like a drop of rain on hot stone. A moment of attention warms, then fades, leaving you hungrier than before. But when you learn to sit in your own presence, even for a breath, you realize you are not incomplete, waiting for someone to finish you. You are already whole, already carrying the sunlight you thought had to come from outside. The lonely heart begins to heal, not when the crowd finally sees you, but when you finally see yourself. Picture a lantern glowing in a dark field. Travelers passing by might catch the light for a moment, admire it, even walk toward it. But the lantern does not depend on their notice. Its flame burns whether anyone sees or not. In the same way, Buddhist teachings guide us to cultivate an inner flame, self-acceptance, self-love that keeps burning even when no one else is watching. When that flame is steady, crowds no longer feel empty. You carry your own warmth with you, and from that warmth, real connection with others becomes possible. The root of the lonely heart, then, is not the absence of people around us, but the absence of our own presence within us. Once we begin to return to ourselves, loneliness transforms. The same crowded room that once felt like exile becomes simply a room, neither threatening nor rescuing. The difference lies in the ground you stand on. When you are rooted in yourself, no crowd can make you vanish and no silence can make you disappear. Buddhist teachings remind us, you do not need to earn your place in the world. You are already worthy, already enough the moment you choose to come home to your own heart. 3. The practice of true belonging. Belonging isn't a place on a map. It's a room you learn to unlock from the inside. That's the heart of true belonging in Buddhist teachings. You don't earn it by collecting invitations, followers, or approving glances. You grow it by learning to come home to yourself on purpose. Picture the way a farmhouse keeps a porch light on through a storm. The road may be dark, the wind might rattle every window, but that small steady glow says, "This way, you live here." When you place a hand on your heart and whisper, "I see you, I am here with you," you flip on that light. You're no longer waiting for someone to rescue you from loneliness. You're returning to the only address that was ever permanent. We forget this because the world is loud. Workrooms hum, group chats ping, airports throb with motion. In all that movement, it's easy to outsource belonging to the crowd. If enough people laugh, if enough nods tilt our way, surely we must be okay. But Buddhist teachings nudge us to notice what happens after the applause fades. The stadium empties, the party ends, and the mind is suddenly as quiet as a wide Midwestern field at midnight. If there's no porch light inside, that quiet can feel like exile. If there is, the same quiet becomes a clean sky where you can finally see the stars. Coming home to yourself isn't an idea you file away. It's embodied. Think of how a violinist checks tuning before a concert. One note held until the string finds center. Presence works like that. You pause. Let your breath settle. Feel the weight of your feet, the warmth under your palm. It's plain, even ordinary. But that ordinariness is power. It invites the nervous system to unclench. It turns a frantic inner crowd into a small, friendly kitchen where you can sit, exhale, and be honest. Buddhist teachings call this kind of honesty the beginning of compassion. You stop ghosting your own feelings and start keeping yourself company. Nature models true belonging everywhere. In the desert, a saguaro's roots spread wide just a foot below the surface, gathering every drop of rain. It survives not by clinging to one deep well, but by being in intimate contact with the ground all around it. We too belong when our attention spreads through the body, breath, chest, belly, jaw, drinking from the life that's already here instead of begging the sky for more. Or take a tide pool at low tide. From afar it looks like a puddle, but lean closer and it's a city. Urchins, tiny fish, anemones opening and closing like slow flowers. Your interior life is a tide pool. When you lean in with presence, it stops being just me and becomes a living world you can care for. This is why the simple phrase, "I see you," matters. Most of us have learned to talk to ourselves like a drill sergeant or a harsh coach. The crowd's voice moved in and set the rules. True belonging begins when you change the tone. When the voice in your chest sounds more like a good neighbor on a front porch, handing you a warm mug and saying, "Sit, tell me what today was like." That friendliness is not self-indulgence. It's fuel. People who feel welcomed at home tend to become steadier out in the world. The more you feel rooted in your own presence, the less you chase rooms that don't fit, and the more you gravitate to conversations that do. There's a quiet shift that happens when you live this way. The same office where you once felt invisible doesn't magically turn into a sanctuary, but it stops being a verdict. You no longer scan faces like a radar searching for proof that you exist. You carry proof with you, and paradoxically, that's when real connection starts. Others sense the difference the way birds sense air pressure before rain. When you're not asking them to fix the hollowness inside you, your attention becomes lighter, kinder, more curious. True belonging within you becomes an invitation around you. Buddhist teachings often speak of taking refuge, which can sound lofty until you translate it into everyday weather. Refuge is a windbreak on a prairie, a stand of cottonwoods that lets the smaller plants survive the gusts. Your hand on your heart is that windbreak. You're not denying the wind. You're giving yourself a place to stand while it blows. From there, you can hear what's actually needed. Maybe a boundary, maybe rest, maybe a hard conversation spoken with a soft mouth. Belonging makes those choices possible because you're no longer making them to win the room. You're making them to stay true to the home inside your ribs. And yes, you'll forget. The phone will glitter, the crowd will roar, old reflexes will tug, but the porch light is easy to relight. One breath, one palm, one honest sentence. I am here with you. Each time you do that, you thicken the path back to yourself like deer trails through tall grass. Over time, it becomes the most natural thing in the world. Not a performance, not a philosophy, just the lived, steady warmth of true belonging. In that warmth, the world is still the world, with all its noise and weather, but you are no longer homeless within it. You are home, and from home, everything you touch becomes a little more human, a little more possible. 4. From self to others. When you finally learn to come home to yourself, the world around you doesn't just look different, it feels different. The walls you once carried like armor soften, the noise in your head settles, and in that quieter space your eyes begin to notice things they used to miss. Buddhist teachings remind us that once we stop running from our own loneliness, we start seeing it mirrored everywhere. The man scrolling his phone at the cafe isn't just bored. He's trying to fill a silence he doesn't know how to sit with. The woman who smiles a little too brightly at every joke is shielding a tender ache behind her practiced expression. The teenager under those headphones isn't only enjoying music. He's creating a fortress, hoping the world won't notice how uncertain he feels. This recognition isn't meant to be heavy. It's liberating. Because suddenly loneliness is no longer a private defect, something wrong with you. It's a thread weaving through all of us. Buddhist teachings describe compassion as the bridge that makes this thread visible. Compassion is not pity and it's not fixing. It's that small shift where, instead of thinking, I'm the only one who feels this way, you realize, we're all carrying something invisible. That realization alone begins to close the distance. Nature carries this lesson in quiet metaphors. Picture a forest after a storm. Broken branches scattered, trunks scarred by lightning. To an outsider, each tree might look like it suffered alone. But beneath the soil, their roots are touching, exchanging nutrients, even sending signals of stress and recovery. What looks solitary above ground is deeply communal below. Human loneliness works the same way. On the surface, we each hide our storms. But when you've softened into your own presence, you can sense the underground network. We are all hurting, all healing together. Compassion, in this sense, is less about grand gestures and more about presence. Imagine sitting by a riverbank. You don't have to stir the water or rearrange the stones. Just by being still, you begin to notice ripples, eddies, the way sunlight paints silver across the current. In the same way, when you offer someone your attention without judgment or agenda, you create a space where their loneliness can breathe. Sometimes all it takes is not looking away, a nod to the stranger who feels invisible, a pause to really hear the co-worker's answer when you ask, "How are you?" These tiny acts don't erase their pain, but they remind both of you that connection doesn't need to be loud to be real. The beauty of Buddhist teachings is that they don't separate self and other as neatly as we often do. They point to a simple truth. When compassion arises, it dissolves the boundary. Your loneliness eases when you recognize theirs. It's like two candles in the dark. Each flame is small, but when they are lit side by side, the room becomes warmer for both. Compassion multiplies light without either flame losing strength. And here is where the transformation truly takes root. Compassion is not a duty, it's a natural outcome of presence. Once you've stopped abandoning yourself, you no longer need to keep others at arm's length. You can look at their struggle without being swallowed by it, just as you can watch waves crash without believing the ocean is only storms. In this way, compassion becomes the bridge that carries us out of isolation, not by building a highway of solutions, but by inviting us to step onto the same ground, side by side. When you live this way, the crowded subway, the grocery line, the office meeting all feel subtly different. The people around you are not obstacles, not strangers, not competitors. They are fellow travelers, each carrying an unseen story. And the moment you let your heart acknowledge that truth, loneliness loosens its grip. Because the bridge has been built, not by them, but by you through the simple act of compassion. When you look closely, you realize something tender. You were never truly alone. The emptiness you felt in a crowd was simply a reminder that you had turned away from yourself. And the moment you return, When you allow yourself to rest in your own heart, the walls begin to dissolve. What felt like isolation becomes connection, first within, then with everyone around you. Buddhist teachings don't promise that loneliness will vanish forever, but they do offer a bridge. Each time you choose presence over pretending, each time compassion reaches from your heart to another's, that bridge grows stronger. And one day you notice, you are no longer standing on one side by yourself. If this touched you, let your reflections become part of the shared journey. Leave a comment. Your words may be the reminder someone else needs. And if you wish to keep walking together through silence, compassion, and the wisdom of the Buddha, I warmly invite you to join me here on Infinite Buddhist Teachings, not as followers, but as friends learning to come home to ourselves.